Let's continue uncovering the secrets of this wonderful book for our lives, the Corpus Hermeticum of Hermes Trismegistus. It's worth concentrating your attention on chapters that bring great depth. We will now begin Chapter 2, Hermes' Universal Discourse to Asclepius. Asclepius was one of the disciples of Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes, is everything mobile, Asclepius, not moved in or by something? Without a doubt, Hermes continues, is what is mobile not necessarily smaller than the place of movement? Certainly, responds Asclepius, is the mover not stronger than what is mobile? Surely, responds Asclepius, does the place of movement not have a nature necessarily contrary to that of the mobile? Yes, that's correct, responds Asclepius, is this world not so big that there is no body larger than it? I agree, responds Asclepius, and it is tense because it is filled with many other large bodies, or rather with all the bodies that exist. That is true. Is the world a body? Yes, it is moved. Without a doubt, responds Asclepius, how great must be the place in which the world is moved, and what is its nature? It is not just that it is much larger than the world so that it can move from it without being restrained or stopped in its movement. It must be something immense, O Trismegistus, responds Asclepius, and of what nature must be this place? Of a contrary nature, right? And the contrary of the body is the incorporeal? I agree, and therefore this place is incorporeal. However, is the incorporeal something divine, or is it God? I call it divine, not that which is generated but that which is uncreated. If the incorporeal is something divine, it is essential. And if it is God, then it is beyond essence. Indeed, it is intelligible, and as for our first intelligible, it is God, but it is for itself because the intelligible is apprehended by the intelligent. Therefore God is not intelligible to himself because in him the thinking subject is not different from the object thought of. For us, God is something distinct, that is why he is an object of thought for us. Well, then, its space is intelligible, isn't it? While God is not as space, but as energy capable of containing all things, everything that is moved moves not in something that is movable, but in something that is at rest, and the mover is also at rest because he cannot participate in the movement of what he moves, Asclepius. So how, then, Trismegistus, do things here below move as the things that move them? Because you said that the planetary spheres are moved by the fixed sphere. Hermes responds, in this case, Asclepius, it is not a shared movement, but a contrary movement because these spheres do not move in the same direction but in the opposite direction, and it is good then to offer movement a fixed point of balance. Indeed, the reaction to movement is immobility. Just as the spheres of the planets move in the opposite direction to that of the fixed sphere, their movement is reversed, that produced by the resistance they establish between themselves and cannot be of another modulus. Are you seeing those two bears, those constellations that neither oppose nor rise? Are they in motion or at rest? They are moved, Trismegistus, responds Asclepius. And what is their movement? Asclepius, they rotate ceaselessly around the same point. Yes, it is a revolution around a center, it is a movement maintained by immobility. After all, circulating around the same center prevents the center from moving away, and the prevented movement is fixed in the circulation. These two contrary movements produce in a stable state always maintained by multiple resistance. I will give you an example taken from earthly objects, something that can be observed, the swimming of the human being and that of the animals. The reaction of the feet and hands makes the person immobile and prevents them from being carried away by the movement of the water and drowning, and this comparison is clear, Trismegistus. Hermes continues, therefore, all movement is produced by immobility, and in an immobility like this, the movement of the world and of all recent material does not come from causes external to the body but from internal causes that act outwardly. That is, from intelligible causes that may be the soul or psyche or spirit pneuma or some incorporeal principle. Finally, one body cannot move another body endowed with a soul, nor can it even move a body devoid of Asclepius' instruction. What do you mean, Trismegistus? Wood, stone, and all other animate things are not moved by bodies? Hermes Trismegistus, no, Asclepius, what moves the inanimate thing, the thing that moves both the body that moves and the one that is moved, is not the body itself, but rather what is within. Never can an inanimate object move another inanimate object, for every mover is animate, since it produces movement. We see how the soul is burdened when it has two bodies to carry. So it is evident that movement is produced by something and in something, Asclepius. But then must the movement be produced in void, Trismegistus? Hermes, do not say that, Asclepius. None of the entities that exist are void because of their substantiality. An entity could not be an entity if it were not filled with substance. The subsistent can never become void. But then there are no empty things, Trismegistus? For example, an empty vessel, an empty barrel, an empty well, an empty chest, and other similar things? Hermes, here, great error, Asclepius, to take as empty things that are completely flat and full. What do you mean, Trismegistus? Is not air a body? Yes, air is a body. This body does not penetrate all things and does not fill what it passes through. Not all bodies are composed of a mixture of the four elements, therefore, everything you think is void is filled with air and consequently with the four elements. And conversely, we can say that what you think is full is empty of air because the presence of other bodies does not allow air to occupy the same space. So the objects you call empty are hollow, not void, for they exist and are filled with air and spirit. Your argument is irrefutable, Trismegistus. Air is a body, and this body penetrates everything and fills everything it penetrates. However, what is the place in which the universe moves? It is the incorporeal, Asclepius. Then what is the incorporeal? It is an intelligence and a reason, the logos, which are completely self-contained, free from any body, exempt from error, impassive and intangible and immutable in their own stability, encompassing all entities and preserving all that exists. Their rays are good, truth, the archetype of the spirit, the archetype of the soul. So what is God? Hermes, he is not any of these things, but rather the cause of all of them and of every particular entity that exists. He did not leave any room for non-being, and every entity comes from what is, not from what is not. Nothing cannot become something, it is its nature not to be able to be. The nature of being, on the contrary, is not to be able to cease to be. Then how do we define God? Trismegistus, God is not intelligence but rather the cause of intelligence, he is not spirit, pneuma, but rather the cause of spirit, he is not light but rather the cause of light. Therefore, the two names by which we should honor God, good and Father, belong only to him and to no one else, for none of those entities we call gods, nor any human being, can be called good. This title belongs only to God, he is the good and nothing else. All other entities are incapable of containing the nature of the good, they are body and soul and have no place to contain the supreme good. The amplitude of the good is as great as the existence of all corporeal and incorporeal entities, sensible and intelligible. For example, what is good? What is God? So do not speak of any other entity as good, for that is impiety, and do not speak of God as anything other than the good, for that is also impiety. And it is true that everyone uses the word good, but not everyone understands its meaning in the same way, nor does everyone understand what God is. And because of this ignorance, they call the gods and some human beings good, even though they cannot be good or become good. Today, good is what can least be subtracted from God, since it is inseparable from God, given that he is God himself. All other gods and mortals are called gods as an honor, but for God, this is not an honorary title, it is his own nature, since God and the good are one and the same thing, from which all things come. The truly good being is one who gives everything without receiving anything. Now, God gives everything and receives nothing. God is the good, and the good is God. Another name for God is Father, by virtue of his creating all things, and because the activity of creation is proper to the Father. Therefore, the highest function of life and the most sacred is the generation of children, and the greatest unhappiness and impiety is to leave human life without children. Those who do not fulfill this duty are punished by the demons after death. And what is their punishment? Their soul is condemned to enter a body that is neither male nor female, a cursed condition under the sun. So, Asclepius, do not envy the fate of those who have no children, but lament their unhappiness, remembering the expiation that awaits them. What I have told you is enough, Asclepius, to give you a preliminary knowledge of the nature of all things. Chapter 3 Sacred Discourse of Hermes Trismegistus. God is the glory of all things and the universe is divine, nature is divine. God, intelligence, nature, and matter are the origin of all beings. God is the wisdom that must stop the manifestation of all things. The divine being is the principle, nature, energy, necessity, purpose, and renewal. Endless darkness was upon the abyss, there was water and there was a subtle and intelligent spirit. These elements were contained in chaos by divine power, then a holy light was cast, and upon detaching from the moist substance, the elements condensed, and all the gods unfolded the entities of germinal nature. With all things still undefined and in disorder, the lighter elements separated from the others and rose, while the heavier elements settled below, under the foundation of moist sand. Then, all things were separated into their parts by the action of fire and suspended to be conveyed by the Spirit, and the sky appeared in 7 circles, and the gods manifested themselves in the form of stars with all their signs, and the sky was completed in every detail by the gods, and the outer circle rotated in the air, sustained in its circular course by the divine Spirit. Each divine principle, netter, performed according to its power the work that was prescribed for it, and then the animals with 4 legs, reptiles, aquatic animals, winged animals, and all the seeds of animals, herbs, and plants, and all the flowers that have a seed of reproduction, were born, and they also manifested human generations to know the works of God and to be active witnesses of nature, to multiply, reign over everything under the sky, and recognize what is good in order to succeed in greatness and multiply in multitude. Through their marvelous circle of action, the celestial gods sent each soul into flesh so that humans could contemplate the sky, the paths of the celestial gods, the works of God, and activate nature so that they could distinguish between good and evil, learn without the power of God to discern between good and evil, and discover all kinds of art for the making of good things. Then humans began to live and understand the destiny assigned to them by the course of the circles of the gods, and the names of many were cancelled by time after leaving great monuments of their arts upon the earth, and each generation of flesh endowed with soul, and also the seeds of fruits and all the works of art, will be renewed by necessity and the renewal of the gods, and by the course of the circle of nature regulated by number. After all the combinations of the cosmos, renewed by nature, come from God, for nature is established in God. In Chapter 4, the Creator and the Unit the monad Hermes Trismegistus to his son Tati, Hermes. Since the Creator created the entire world not with his hands but with his word Logos manages it as being present and always existing as the author of everything and the one who is one and only and the one who created all beings through his will. Therefore his body is neither tangible nor visible nor measurable nor extensive nor similar to nor of another body. In fact he is neither fire nor water nor air nor suffer, but everything comes from him, and as he is good he did not want to reserve this gift only for himself nor to adorn the earth only for himself. So he sent down the human being who is the form of God's body. For this reason he is a mortal being who nevertheless cannot die. This the world prevailed over living creatures by the immortality of his life. Human beings prevailed over the world by reason and intelligence. He was born to contemplate the works of God, to marvel at them, and to know his Creator. Therefore, Tati, God distributed reason to all human beings but not intelligence, not because he envied some, because envy does not come from above but is born in the souls of human beings who do not possess intelligence. Why then, Father God did not distribute intelligence to everyone? Because he wanted, my son, that it be for souls as a prize to be conquered. And where did he put it? Hermes answers. He filled a great crater with intelligence and had it carried away by a messenger ordering him to proclaim the following words to the hearts of human beings. Baptize yourselves if you can in this crater, you who believe that I will return to the one who sent it to you, who know why you were born, and all those who responded to this call and were baptized in this baptism of intelligence. These possessed gnosis and became perfect men, for they received intelligence. Those who did not understand are the farthest because they have reason but will not receive intelligence as a compliment. They ignore why and from whom they were born and the sensations of these. Human beings resemble those of animals without reason, as their temperament remains in a state of passions and islands. They do not admire what is worthy of contemplation. They only indulge in the pleasures and appetites of the body and believe that this is the purpose of human existence. However, those who receive the gift of God, these Tati, when we consider their works we perceive that they are immortal and no longer mortal, for them encompass all things with intelligence, those of the earth but of heaven and all that can be beyond heaven. To the height they reached they contemplated well. My having contemplated, they considered their stay down here as good suffering. Then, having ceased to appreciate all corporeal and incorporeal things, they hurriedly turned to knowledge of intelligence, to contemplate divine things and understand God, because the Creator is divine. Tati, I also want to be immersed in the Creator. Father Hermes respond, if you do not first begin to detach yourself from your body, my son, you will not be able to love yourself, but to love yourself you will be able to possess intelligence, then you will obtain knowledge. What do you mean by that, Father? The sun cannot cling to both these things at the same time. Mortal things and divine things explain how the two kinds of beings, the corporeal and the incorporeal, and these two categories distinguish between what is mortal and what is divine. One must choose one or the other, for one cannot grasp both at the same time, and when we make a choice, the abandonment of one manifests the active power of the other, and by choosing the best we obtain not only a magnificent reward, apotheosis or divinization of the human being, but also show furthermore our piety towards God. On the contrary, the choice of the worst leads the human being to perdition, and even though it is not an offense to God, it is in the following sense: these walkers who are unable to produce something good on their own do not fail to hinder the path of others, and only pass through the world dragged by the pleasures of the body, since it is so taught the good that comes from God is always and will always be at our disposal, but what is up to us must correspond to that good and must direct itself to it as soon as possible. And after all, evil does not come from God, it comes from ourselves who prefer it. Does someone perceive, son, how many bodies we have to cross, how many hierarchies of demons and belts of stars to reach to the God Julius and the only one? And what is good is unlimited, it has no beginning or end in itself, it has no beginning, but for us there seems to be one, which is agnosis or knowledge. Agnosis is not the beginning of good, but it is through it that it begins for us, so we must take it as a guide to advance rapidly through all obstacles. It is difficult to leave present and customary things to make the way back to old things, and first appearances enchant us, and we refuse to believe in the invisible. Sometimes things but are more apparent to the eyes, quite the contrary. It is not visible to the visible eyes because it has no form or figure. It is seen as it is different from everything else because it is impossible for the incorporeal to become apparent to a body X that the similar distinguish different, in which the different is inferior to the similar. Finally, as the monad is the principle and the root of all, and it exists in all things as its principle and root, sometimes nothing without principle, but the principle does not derive from nothing except from itself, since everything derives from it. It is itself its principle, since there is no other than being the principle. The unit currency, which is the principle, contains all numbers and is not contained by any, and it engenders them all and is not engendered by any other number. All that is engendered is imperfect, divisible, susceptible to increase or decrease, sometimes perfect, has none of these characteristics which can grow. It grows by the unity mode and succumbs to its own weakness when it can no longer contain the unit. This taught the image of God that was sketched for you as much as possible to do, and if we contemplate it attentively we will understand them with the eyes of the heart. Believe, my son, you will find the path of ascension to higher or better things, and this image will show you the way. It itself is that the contemplation of this divine image has to do everything right to do in those who once contemplate it and attract them to itself as a magnet. The box. And we finish reading these chapters. Once again, I recommend that if you feel or if you pause again to make your notes, so that this learning is deepened in your to Hermes Trismegistus and does not put us before the question of creation, before God, before the supreme power, before unity, before the one and only power that existed and always will exist. And if you like this content and are not subscribed, subscribe, like, share, leave your comments. This helps a lot in the engagement of the videos here on YouTube. I thank, and may the light of Christ manifest its power every day in your life. It is done, and so it is.